My paintings, titled Our Heroes, documents the coronavirus world pandemic and has won several awards at Asian and international levels. The pandemic has changed my daily life. I just stay at home and watch the news to understand what is going on around the world. I compile all the stories I saw in the news and draw all the frontliners in my painting. Our Heroes Series 1 has won an Asian Award organized by Archaeologo Asia. I received a consolation prize for the painting by National Arts Gallery, Go Gallery, Kuala Lumpur. It is also being used as a tribute to the frontliners by the Ministry of Health Malaysia in their daily social media reporting. The image was made edible onto 3,500 cakes for International Nurses Day. Since NCO was enforced, we could not travel out and must stay home to be safe. I saw all the police, firefighters and army control the movement of the people. So I painted them and the world pandemic statistic onto my painting. This painting has been shortlisted in a global painting competition under the category Contemporary Art. After several months of staying home, we started to order food. Then I painted a bigger painting and combined all the pictures I saw together with the delivery man, Grab, Foodpanda and Nana. This painting was broadcasted on television channel T1 RTM for coronavirus awareness. In June 2020, I was in the World Generation Z Creative and Committed Against the Virus together with other creative youth around the world. This story was published by Agency France Presse AFP in Paris and received more than 193 media coverage worldwide in 6 continents of the world. All these paintings are done during the pandemic for awareness. It is a historical manuscript, like a history book in a form of paintings. My life will have to change for a long-term period. I need to practice the new normal, like social distancing, washing hands, wearing a mask, avoiding crowds. The whole world is in lockdown. The world needs to change to the new normal to avoid a second wave of the virus spreading. These paintings show the new normal. All buildings turn green and people are doing social distancing.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Azizam Abdul Rashid, and welcome today at Malaysia a foreign pre-event webinar hosted by Urbanice Malaysia to create better city in Malaysia to promote sustainable and climate responsive urban development through knowledge sharing, partnership, program, and multi-stakeholders engagement. Today's webinar is a revitalization of cultural and creativity industry, which is aimed to reimagine how our culture and creative industry at post-COVID-19. The discussion will highlight the expose of participants on the various aspects of culture, arts, and creativity industry to address current issues. Inquiry, new knowledge through intellectual discourse of various subject matter experts were related to the topic with local and international experience. We'll be discussing together with some of most prominent speakers, or I call it the trendsetter, culture and creative scholars, along with Wan Moniza Hashim, Chief Executive of Urbanice Malaysia. This session will be moderated by Datuk Urbani Mijan, Urbanice Malaysia Board Director and former Director of Director General Plan Malaysia. Before I go further, I want to review some functionality of the Go to webinar. Your active participation is important throughout the session. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noise that may disrupt you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, someone of our staff will be managing the chatting functionally You can enter your question and comments in the question box throughout the presentation. It could be rather as a person. You can also use the icon on the control panel to raise your hand to indicate that you have questions and comments that suit to your question. Once you raise your hand, someone will unmute you a line so you can ask the question. So everyone's ready, let the show begins. I pass the microphone to our moderator, Dr. Urbanice. Please, Dato', the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rizal from Urbanice. First and foremost, I would like to thank my for moderating this very, I would say, very sunlight kind of webinar. Yeah? So I think this kind of webinar should be encouraged during this kind of pandemic, COVID-19. And I think it's the first time, I guess, yeah, we are having this webinar online. The webinar is online in virtual because it's why for virtual Malaysian Forum 2000 second round, yeah, or second year, organized by Malaysia. Talking about, and of course, we are having here in very, I would say, very classic and very design-oriented cafe. We call it Liberal Latte Cafe in Damansara. And of course, in very santai manner, santai and also relaxed manner. So, Dr. Azlizan giving us some insight, but just now it's very simple. Of course, I have to introduce myself. Urbanice bin Bijan, former Director General Plan Malaysia, and I will say something about this event. With themes, culture and creative cities, revitalization of culture and creativity industry. The impact, I think the impact of COVID-19 or COVID-19 in the world is very big, it's very great. And according to recent building by Malaysian Culture Economic Development Agency or Cendana, the COVID-19 to the arts report, some 93% of the 519 arts players surveyed were negatively impacted by the pandemic. It's very, very big. It's almost 100%, 93%. Close to the 70% of arts organizations last most, if not all, their income of 60% had event postponed, while the remaining 30% suffered cancellation. And it's useful, I have to use this. Yeah. The report based on a survey conducted between March 19 and April 9, 2020 revealed another worrying fact: 93% of the art players surveyed didn't have an active employee or EPF account. Worse, 57% of the survey participants admitted to having dependent family members. More than 40% of those surveyed comprised those from the performing arts sector, 30% were from music industry, and 20% comprised those individual arts. I think it's very, very effective. Yeah. Okay. I think that's why we try to have some voices here and there. We try to conduct this virtual seminar, and with the objective, one is to promote the active participation of artists in creating industry inclusive and sustainable cities, to discuss how intangible culture and arts are practiced and used as a source of fostering social cohesion and cherishing diversity in the city to situate our conversation in the wider global context as well as national context we make. Yeah, I just touch a few objectives here. We have this morning we have four very distinguished and very active what you call panelists involved or participating in virtual Malaysia Urban Forum 2020. And we have Mr. Edwin Cole, founder and director of Pusaka, journalist and culture activist, with us, physically here. Mr. Joe Side, Festival Director of Rainforest Fringe Festival, is going to be with us online. Mr. Ahmad Faris, founder and creative director of Tapau TV. I just curious how we got this Tapau. It's very synonym for Malaysian uncos. I think Tapau is Chinese word, but now it's very widely used by everyone here in Malaysia. And also of course, we have architect and also architect, Professor Nur Hashimah, Muhammad Nurdin, art manager at Jamila Gallery, and also we have this very important person in Urbanice, discuss Madam Taumen Noliza Hasin as CEO Urbanice, and she will be coming as our discussant. Yeah. So, without further ado, I think the best thing is we had these panelists to introduce themselves. Yeah? Where you come from, who are you, and probably the experience you have done so far. Yeah? So, without further ado, I would like to call probably yeah, please.
My name is Edin Koo. I'm a writer and I'm the founder and director of an organization called Pusaka, Ritual and Traditional Artists.
Should I introduce myself? Yes. Yes, hello. Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Faris. I am the creative director and founder of Tapau TV. And if some of you don't know what Tapau TV is, the whole idea of Tapau came about when I saw there was a lot of amazing independent talents in Malaysia, and a lot of people don't know about it. So just like you do during your breakfast, you go Tapau your nasi lemak, your curry puff, and whatever. What we do at Tapau TV and Tapau Asia now is that we Tapau all these amazing creative independent talents in Malaysia, and now we're targeting Southeast Asia. And we serve it in one place, which is Tapau Asia. And we've been running for the past 10 years now as an online platform where people get to discover these talents. And now we are running Tapau Asia with the intention of becoming the home of Southeast Asia's independent community. Yes.
Yes, please.
Hello, good morning. I am Nur Hashimah. I am an architect. I've been practicing for about 30 years as an architect, and recently I have a new profession that is like I moved into art and became the founder and also art manager to Jamila Gallery. So I'm here just to share my little experience.
Okay, thank you. We have all three in the physical, and also what about Joe Side over there?
Yeah, hi. Hi.
Hi.
My name is.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. My name is Joe. I come from Penang. I read town planning, but I'm an industrialist. I run a family factory. But 10 years ago, I graduated to doing festivals. So my background is festivals.
Okay. Thank you for all the panelists. We have Joe Side also online with us. This morning, webinar actually is we had 3 rounds. Round 1 with The themes, the impact of culture and creativity industry in urban activities, pre-COVID-19, and some word of caution to the panelists. I think everyone will speak about 5 minutes each to present your view for paper presentation and subject to question for panelists and also on panel discussion. Yeah, and also what else? That's very important, I guess. The time limit given to you, and I think let's go for the first round. Yeah, we start with Eddie first. Yes, please.
In looking at the impact of COVID on the cultural life, I suppose, of the city and elsewhere, and a lot has been spoken about and discussed about the creative industries. I think my views have been put out there for throughout this period, and I assume, or I think that my views are a little contentious in the sense that we understand COVID to be what the world has come to call the great leveler, in that it has basically leveled everything, and we need to rethink and we need to basically redefine the purpose of everything. I think the operative word here is purpose. And I understand people's lives have been affected all across the board, sometimes very detrimentally, and it has been very difficult for artists in particular, who are of course engaged on a daily basis with interaction. Yet there are very fundamental questions that have arisen, and I think one of the very important things that needs to be discussed is about, when we talk about a creative and cultural industry, how much of an industry we actually are. Simply because we lack so much of the infrastructure, the networking, the ethos, actually, the understanding of what a creative cultural industry actually is. And I think there has been, through the various decades, a kind of pretense that somehow we are organized enough to call ourselves an industry, when in fact we are not. And when something like this has affected us, what was COVID really all about? COVID was all about isolation. And with isolation comes a lot of introspection. Unfortunately, with COVID, and the suddenness of it is, when you're desperate, it's very hard to be introspective. Nevertheless, as an industry, if you call yourself an industry, by which you basically mean a community, I think a community should come together and very rigorously interrogate very fundamental things about creative life in this country. I do believe there are many aspects of creative life that are still very much an indulgence. A lot of our arts is mired in mediocrity. And so very often it doesn't also have the kind of community and social affirmation that the arts would require. So some aspect of culling in the arts is inevitable. And I think we need to rethink all of these processes. But the very important, another very important aspect that we need to pay a great deal of attention to is, of course, how we construct infrastructure. What consists an industry, handouts and the other point I'd like to make, of course, is that when we talk about the creative industry, we are essentially focusing all our attention on Kuala Lumpur. This was one of my major complaints, I think, when members of the arts were invited to meet the Minister of Finance to talk about, viable, a kind of viable financial safety net for artists. And I was absolutely aghast that nobody had ever thought of traditional artists traditional practitioners who are not concentrated in KL, who perform, for example, very important roles in community life outside, but are not housed within theatres that need funding and emergency funds to survive and things like that. So again, our perspective, I think, is not expansive enough. Our perspective is not broad enough, and it seems extremely tragic that in conversations of this nature, the very basis of our foundation, which is the traditional artist, is completely marginalized and overlooked.
Sophia?
Good. So we are still in the pre-COVID. Actually, our webinar today is very pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. But the first round, actually, the first for pre-COVID-19. So I would like also listen from
Paris.
Paris.
All right. Okay. Well, I really like what Edith said. Like, it really does me really well. I think before we go pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, I think the problems that we face have always been the same. It doesn't matter if it's before or after COVID. COVID is just a situation for me that kind of like wakes up everyone through the issues that we have. But essentially, the problems that the industry, in a way, has been fundamental issues that's been going around for ages. So, true to the fact that I'm probably part of the millennial generation, instead of presenting to you a thesis or things like that, I'm going to read you a Facebook status that I posted, which I think a while back, but I think it really fits with our discussion today. Basically, I read this article, which was written by Bloomberg to do with City Labs, where they invited the biggest rock star ever, Dave Grohl, to come and talk to mayor, city council, and stuff like that. And I think the insights that he brought was kind of interesting. So yes, a community that has a rich and exciting, vibrant music scene brings a lot of happiness to the place. It's like air, it's important. You need to have that in your life just to remind you that life's worth living. That's what Dave Grohl said. And I think that's very key, because before we talk about industry or economics, we need to understand what is the value of art. And I think that's the basic thing that's missing. So I'm going to continue to read what I wrote a while back. So many people talk about solutions on how to build a better music/creative industry. But have we really figured out what the problem is before working on a solution? Do we recognize why having a local independent scene is important for the community and society in the first place before jumping into the whole industry talk? So I'm talking in the perspective of independent scene, because that's what I represent. First of all, I don't really think there is an industry to begin with, and we won't be ready to have an industry unless we recognize the real problem is that a big part of our society fails to recognize the importance of arts, hence why the arts appreciation culture is barely there. But there is hope. We have a thriving local independent scene, a scene made of talented creators, which is made of musicians, filmmakers, photographers, graphic designers, ballsy entrepreneurs, which is gig organizers, venue owners, and super supporters, which are your crews, your volunteers, and your fans. But we have to cultivate art appreciation and support for the scene. We need to grow the community and build a healthy and sustainable ecosystem together. Then let's talk about industry or creative economy or whatever we want to call it. So basically, the way that I see it, we've got two main fundamental issues. The first being that what we're talking about culture and creative industry. But in the first place, the biggest problem for me is there's no art appreciation culture. And that's, I mean, what you see is during school, I don't know whether it's the same until now. Do people still belajar music and learn how to play the recorder in their music class? I don't know whether they do or not. But I would say, like, I went to school outside of KL. So I really think that there's a different experience learning music or learning arts in different places. And I feel like it's very important that art appreciation is put into, even to the point starting from education. And when I went to school, I don't know whether it's the same now. Yes, art class and music class is just you learning. Music class is basically learning how to play recorder, and art class is like, you know, those batang whatever, and then you put chat, and then you chop chop chop, which is like interesting, but very basic. And up till recently, we did a campus tour, basically to understand how the students that study arts are. And what we realized is that I went to one of the universities and I asked them, like, you know, one of the things that I had in my presentation is about Yasmin Ahmad. So I asked them, like, you know, you guys are studying advertising. How many of you guys know who Yasmin Ahmad is? And it was silent. And that's crazy. If people don't know Yasmin Ahmad, I hope they know Piramli. So that's one thing. I feel that the art appreciation culture is really lacking, and it needs to start down there in order for us to understand the value of art, because art is not a roof above your head, it's not food for your belly, but art keeps you warm, art can save lives, art can become your company, right? And the other thing is that's really, really missing in part of what Edith said, and I truly agree with this, is an ecosystem. We really need to have an ecosystem, because there cannot be a community, there cannot be a sustainable community without an ecosystem. And without ecosystem, you cannot have industry. And I think it kind of shows how art and culture is taken by the fact that we are not represented by any specific ministry. We are in between ministries, and I feel sayangnya macam like that kind of shows how kind of like not important it is in a way. And there's also governance and policy making, and what we're seeing is that every time the government changes or every couple of years, whatever policy that's set in order to build this whole ecosystem, it has to restart every time you change. And that's probably not helping at all. So I feel, yeah, so in conclusion, I think there's two basic issues, which is to do with art appreciation and also ecosystem. So yeah, that's thank you.
Thank you, Paris. I think if this two guys talking about the nature of culture and creative cities, how they define and so on. I think we move forward. Probably Brian may ask anyone here, probably Joe or probably Norashima, how have the culture and creative cities shaped urban growth and local economics development in cities, and how can culture facilitate greater inclusion in cities?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If I go back to what Mr. Faris had said, and also Joe has mentioned about the culture, we don't have the industry. I mean, that is true, you know, and the ecosystem like you mentioned. Currently, actually, Malaysia is a very rich country. You know, we can feel like Brazil, for instance, Brazil is very rich in multicultural city, Paris is known like a cultural city. So Malaysia has a similar as Brazil, where they have a multiracial, multicultural, which can be a sample in Malaysia. Currently Malaysia is not there yet. Yeah, so we have a lot of work to do.
Yes, Joe, you are there?
Yeah. I just got off guard a bit. So, I'd like to echo what Eden and Ahmad Faris said, you know. But we're lucky here a bit in Penang because of the UNESCO listing. The word tangible and intangible became in our heads what is important to us, you know. And I think like what is interesting is how Singapore's position itself, instead of just being a livable city, it's now pushing for a lovable city. And so So I think like what Edin said, we need to rethink, reevaluate, rework, reimagine. it's not just the COVID, it's before the COVID. We didn't have a proper structure, we didn't have a proper ecosystem. Censorship is a major issue in the arts. So how can we ever grow? You know, so here in Penang, we have been a bit luckier. Have I lost you all?
Yeah.
It's bad connection. Anyway, basically, it's lack of ecosystem, and how do we have the community working together? And I think we're a bit luckier here in Penang because everybody works together. The state, the council, the people, the public, NGOs work together.
Okay.
Lucky Penang.
Yeah. Probably, Ari, want to say more about urban growth or what?
No, I want to lift off from quite a few things that were mentioned here. Now, when we talk about a creative and cultural industry, we're not merely talking and engaging a kind of platitudinous thing. Art is so nice for us, and of course, at a fundamental level, to the arts and society, that is hugely important. And nowhere is that more clear than, for example, in a Mak Yong performance in Kuala Besut or a Main Putri performance in Bajo. That's when you see how important art is in revitalizing the actual individual and community. But those are big philosophical discussions. When we talk about the cultural and creative economy in this country and industry in this country, our language itself is very unevolved because it's all about a lot of niceties about what art can do for us, and you know, things like its place in urban life. But there's very little profound interrogation about things like the place of culture in urban regeneration. And of course, a lot about culture and the arts now involves things like economics. It should not just be a matter of the Ministry of Culture talking about cultural matters. And over here too, as Faris was saying, you know, it's then confused with tourism and money generating and things like that. Money generating is important. Money is hugely important to culture, but let's have a very sensible and deep conversation about it. Culture should be at the heart of our economic life. Look at a country like Indonesia. The cultural economy is right there at the heart of this 2050 economic blueprint. So it's being discussed by economists, it's being discussed by urban planners, it's being discussed by a whole variety of people, and not just a group of agencies entrusted with you know, talking about the arts and making people's lives better in the arts, but about how culture is right at the center of our economic, social, and cultural life. We don't have that vocabulary at all. It's extremely, extremely unevolved. And most of the people entrusted with the job or with the responsibilities of creating a cultural industry here don't actually know what a cultural industry is. Yeah, there is very, very little literacy. So we arrive at a very semi-literate understanding of what culture can be as a driving factor and a motivating factor, not just in economic life, but in, you know, expressions of ourselves as a community and culture and nation. Especially in Malaysia, and I agree completely. We are one of the oldest cosmopolitan societies in the world, where the whole world is grappling today with issues of multiculturalism, multi-religious tensions within their societies. We have an advantage of 500-600 years of that being absolutely organic to us. But again, because we are so much of a semi-literate society, we don't understand our own past, we don't understand our own interactions, and that of course causes us to be now really a culture of mimicry and imitation. We are constantly trying to imitate other models without actually looking internally, understanding our place in history, understanding our place in region, understanding the interactions that have and created a shared history for all of us. And we should actually be instructed to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I would also kind of like agree with that as well. The fact is, you've got to talk about hope, you know. You've got to talk about the bright sparks. And Malaysia has amazing things. Like the reason why I started Tapau in the first place is the fact that, you know, I'm lucky enough to be able to travel with my family when I was younger, and I got to see how the art scene anywhere else is. And in terms of talent, we've got abundance of it, and it's crazy. Like, we've got so many talented people. The issue is there's no community and ecosystem that's there, and somehow art has become something of a luxury. Kind of like, you know, how the way that I feel about people who's also in charge, like how many of them actually go on ground. And art is not just about buying a painting in a gallery. You know, art should be something that kids in school be able to appreciate. And of course, we see a huge difference between us and Indonesia as well. When you look at Indonesia, the kids in school are learning poetry from their own people. Like, since school, they're like, but for us, there are certain places, but there's definitely a disconnect. Like, you look at different schools and different areas, and the reason why is because this whole initiative is taken by the school itself or independent people, instead of it being like a governance or policy that kind of helps to encourage that. And there's definitely positives, but I think we should build upon that. You know, embrace the fact that, you know, we are kind of amazing. Except that when you talk about mimicking, for example, like Edin said, you know, why are our movies that's being funded making movies about things that doesn't really represent who we are? You're seeing gangster movies, which is great, you know, Hollywood stuff, it kind of works. But what happens to the story of how a fisherman falls in love with the son of a businessman? Kind of like smaller stories that kind of represents us. And we're seeing it in music as well. The way that some musicians write music about falling in love, it's like they live in California. Instead of it like, you know, you pergi kedai, you jumpa seorang, and you know, that should, why it's easier to connect that way. But we don't embrace it because that's just not the way that we've seen stuff. That's not the way that music is written. And independent scene, I would say I see a lot more of people really connecting to our culture. And it's very important because these things builds character, it builds identity. Like, you want to be proud to be from Malaysia because you represent these kind of things. And we're missing out on a lot if we don't fully kind of like embrace that and take that in. Yeah.
Okay, that's very enlightening. We are almost finished the first round, isn't it? We have to stop here for a while before we start second round. Say again? Yes. We continue still, continue for that is to be here. Okay. Anyone who would like to say about challenges? Yeah, during challenges faced by cultural and creative entrepreneur in the cities. Even though you have mentioned something just now, probably want to say more. Probably Joe want to say something about challenges in Penang. Whether you have mentioned a bit. Joe?
Okay, I actually like to touch what Edin and Ahmad said. I mean, I think it's brilliant. You know, when you look around Bujang Valley, Malacca, Penang, we were cosmopolitan way before anyone else. You know, we were the center of everything. And you look at Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand now, we are a little bit lagging in the cultural creative industries. You know, you have all these creative cities in Bandung and Chiang Mai, and we don't have one in Malaysia. I think, like, I like what Ahmad said. Let's move forward. Let's think positive. Like Jesus said, forgive them, Lord, for they did not know. I think the lack of a good ministry, especially for culture, we've always been uncut. We've been put in sports, youth, tourism. We should be under education, actually, or partnered with education, not the other ministries that would be more relevant for us to partner education. And then I think, like, if we really had proper report cards, I'd probably be banned from ever going on a webinar again. You had proper report cards about Istana Budaya and JKKN and National Gallery. And you look at like in Karyanika, have they been functioning? If you put money in that, if I was a CEO, have I passed my tests? Have I brought culture outside Malaysia? Have I actually promoted culture within Malaysia that has had a good reach out? So I'm not sure about that, whether these 4 institutions have actually had report cards. But like Ahmad said, I'm very positive. I love the country. I don't want to blame, and I think we can work independently, parallel to the government, to support initiatives so that the government sees that there is a way forward, there is a way out. We can do this together, government and non-government. Thank you.
Shima, probably want to add some more? Yeah. Before we can go further.
Okay, in my case, it's the other way around. We changed our paradigm. Instead of concentrating on art, selling art, we actually concentrate more on competition, global competition around that. And actually, Jamila explode during COVID-19. She traveled all over the world virtually. She was in the Generation Z. She had a big coverage by France agency press, and her news went travel to all the 6 continents of the world after she won an award on the Arts and award on COVID-19. So it's like we learn learn paradigm shift, right? So that we can adjust our situation with the environment, the current environment. So that's it. But I know the whole world is affected badly, especially the art and culture. Almost every event, all events was cancelled. So.
I think maybe just to bring focus back to COVID-19, although I do believe that this is a problem, nothing to do with COVID-19 is something that impacts the whole world, right? In the independent scene, musicians, artists definitely suffer a lot. You know, Sridhar came up with statistics, but I think you don't need you don't kind of need those stats to know that people are struggling. My company, for example, I had a company of 8 people running Tapau TV. Which is an online kind of platform whereby we do contents to kind of like focus on the independent scene. But you don't really make money from doing contents about artists or musicians, who's going to pay for that? So the way that we had to find the balance is, my background is in production, my company does production work, so we kind of like had to juggle between taking in jobs, doing production work and events, working with brands that want to work with independent artists. That's how we sustain. Making stuff, doing independent, letting people know about the whole scene, that's not money making. And that's always been the struggle, because it's really hard to monetize from that. And of course, when COVID-19 hit, how many production houses are out there? How many of these companies that focus on creative services and don't have jobs? And I had to close down my old company because of that. 8 people I had to let go, because there's no way I can afford to pay them in these current situations. Before this, we kind of had to juggle. Now there's nothing to juggle with. So it's definitely a huge hit for us. But of course, as artists, especially independent artists, are very smart in a way. The time that they have during COVID-19, even though they don't, because a lot of musicians and let's talk about musicians. Most musicians, the way that they sustain is by playing gigs, right? So during COVID-19, of course, there's no gigs. You're not getting shows anymore. The film crews are not getting jobs because you can't get permit to shoot, right? So, but a lot of them have been creative enough that, they use this time in order for them to really work and think. It's like going masuk dalam gua sekejap, you masuk dalam gua, you really think about it and try to create better art. But there's some that's like that. But you have to understand that we're losing so many artists, musicians and stuff during this time. Because a lot of them, I'm already struggling before I started this. Now that this happened, I might as well move and do something else. And the thing about art and creative is that, especially in Malaysia, it takes time. And when the support comes, and it does, in India, Chandana kind of helped out as well, it's kind of hard for all these artists and musicians to access these kind of things. I mean, you're asking musicians and artists who's best when they create art or play music to come up with a business proposal, to fill up forms, which is something that they need to get used to. I completely agree, but there has to be help in that sense as well. You can't expect these people to suddenly come out with like a business deck that is gonna give you 3 years projection. And first of all, like, even if they're smart enough, there's no way you could project up to 3 years. How you gonna make money? Art is benda yang akan ambil masa. And I feel like that has to be tackled as well, because it's not just about coming up with solutions. It's about how you get the solution to the people that you really want to help. Because you can't say like, okay, I've come up with a solution, there's money out there, now you guys have to come to me. The nature of artists themselves is pretty hard for them to access that. Although like, I do appreciate all the help that the independent scene has been getting, but I do feel like, again, it all comes back to, are the people that supposedly in power willing to go down? And I know, like, you've already got the money there, people should come to you. But if you really want to help, instead of it being about KPI, how many people manage to submit and stuff like that, if you really want to help, you need to go down and really understand the struggle of these artists. Because we're going to lose so many artists if not. Venue owners are really, really struggling. We're seeing that. Independent artists, filmmakers, but that's the thing, of course, I always try to think back about the positive as well. You've been seeing a lot of our independent filmmakers, for example, Emir, who's got a movie out now called Roh, is started from the independent scene. We've got Nick Ame, who's still shooting his film. People like Yuna started from the independent scene. So there is a lot of potential there, but I think the people in charge have to understand as well that this is something that takes time. It's not gonna, for example, my business, when I started Tapau TV, it's a startup. So normally startups in Malaysia, to be honest with you, a lot of startups that do well, that are startups that actually copy whatever business that's done overseas and basically find a way to apply here. But when I do something like Tapau TV, it's something that's completely new. So the business module, figuring out the market, building the culture takes time. But a lot of investors don't have the patience. And I understand because these are investors. But is it the same for government help? You know, you kind of need to treat it like, you know, these are investment that's going to take time. And we might not even make money. But how important is it to really make money in how many years' time compared to your cultivating a community that's gonna build cultures, represent. You know, you can't quickly want to win an Oscar. You can't straight away say like, oh, I want to. No, the discussions that I go to, people talk about like, oh, how do we bring out the next Yuna? How do we win Oscars? Dude, you're so far off. That's so far away. You know, calm down, chill out. Really think about like it's going to take years and understand what's going on first. Understand what you have and really appreciate that. And you know, it takes time to build it. So don't rush it. Don't try to win Oscar. Don't try to find the next Yuna. You chill out, try to figure out what we have and cultivate that. And it takes time. Sorry for some areas.
Okay, I agree with you, Faris, 100%. I searched the web. My creative ventures under Chandana are giving 100 million loans, yeah, to the creative industry. Did any one of you apply for that?
No, why would I apply for a loan? Getting my own grave.
Yeah, I know, but I never did also. So I wonder, maybe one of the setbacks is due to bureaucracy, right? Like you mentioned, you have to fill out OT paper and all that, which is not our forte. I mean, for architects, yes, maybe, but not for artists. You see, even me, I am an architect. I got fed up doing all those things after doing those in 30 years, yeah, for 30 years. So I agree with that. Maybe there is a big gap between the authorities and also the practitioners, which is the artists. So there's someone else who needs to make the link regarding that.
Yeah, I kind of agree yet don't agree. Because if you're asking for public money, you have to.
Yes, yes.
You know, one of the things that I find very strange about artists here is how much they feel they need to be indulged, literally for nothing.
Yeah.
They don't produce very good things in the first place. Yeah. So many of our venues, for example, is seriously mediocre stuff that is going on there. There's so many aspects of the so-called arts industry we talk about here that remain unevolved. For example, where is criticism? You know, where is sustained criticism in the press about art? When we talk about arts appreciation, one of the first principles of arts appreciation is criticism. The ability to go and view something and understand what is going on and then evaluate it. All that is not existent. We used to have a very vibrant press. I was a theatre critic for 15, 20 years. The book reviews are not there in the press anymore. And there's another huge area here that is not being discussed at all. We constantly talk about the creative fields and the support system that's supposedly supposed to come from the government, which is public money. There is that large lacuna or vacuum here of talking about corporate people. Where is private enterprise in our ecosystem and interaction? There is none, because we have not also developed a culture in private enterprise of believing in things like social investment, cultural investment, investment in education. That is the ecosystem you need. The government cannot keep coming up with money because it's public money.
Yes,
And public money cannot be spent on very mediocre things. That conversation also needs to happen. So if you're talking about filling in forms and being accountable for the money you receive, we are actually quite lax here. You look at countries like Singapore, other more, even places like India, for example, that have a very, while Indians complain about the infrastructure,
I like to respond to this.
Far superior it is than to us.
Yeah, I think Joe.
I like to respond to this.
Yes,
Yes.
Joe.
I sit on Cendana as an industry panel advisor, along with other people in the industry. So, this is a new grant that we rolled out 2 years ago, and we're also still learning. As I didn't say, it's public money. So if you're going to take 100,000, 150,000, you need to fill forms. We've had really big names saying, I don't want to fill forms. How can we give you money when you don't fill forms? You need to fill forms to buy a car. Now, there have been workshops, and last year we started, and this year they came to Penang, they went to Johor, they went to Sabah Sarawak to educate people how to fill the forms and how to structure. So that if you're going to ask for money, there must be some paperwork, there must be some accountability. And so there has been a positive sign that last year's, when they were rejected, they came back this year with proper bookkeeping, they've registered their company. So I think, I feel as if the government's given a lot of money from MOF, from Cendana. There's a lot of money there. And we are hopefully goalkeepers to who gets the money well and well used. That's why we have to have guidelines, and we have to be very careful whether these companies, the money is not being misused. We need the reports. I wanted to resign as a panel member so that I could apply for these grants. They have a lot of different grants for industry organization, for programming. So please, don't diss Cendana. It's only a few years old. Cendana needs help. Cendana needs to have comments. Edin, I agree with you. Cendana needs commentary, feedback, criticism, so that we can get better. But don't diss it. We need help. It's like the government. If the government's not doing a good job, we help them. We teach them, educate them, ajarkan. Not to just diss and say no. I feel Cendana is a good body. If not, I would have resigned 2 years ago. I feel as if being inside, I'm able to at least respond or understand where the money goes.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was dissing Cendana. Nobody was dissing Cendana at all. if I was dissing anybody all, I think I was dissing the artist who somehow feels that they are not they're not accountable to the funds. But anyway, I'll pass it on to you and then come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, like, I'm not saying that people should fill up forms. No, but that's not the issue. It is government money. People do need to fill up forms. What I'm saying is that, which is great, like, I work with Jennifer Thompson, who's basically doing the tour with Cendana, basically to go down and teach younger people about all these artists, about like, how do you deal, and Reza Saleh was on board as well there.
Yeah.
They to go down and do it, which is great. But I mean, it's not like, boom, Cendana is the problem. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying is that there has to be those things that Cendana is doing to make the artists understand how this works is important. Keep it going. But that's not how it works all the time. And that has to be dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Joe, we are not blaming Cendana. Actually, Cendana is an umbrella to the art and culture. It's just that it is not that vibrant here in Malaysia. Yes, the only problem is maybe Malaysia need to do a testing. I think most of the artists in Malaysia, they are also proprietor. I mean, they don't even have a company or enterprise. So I think that would be something block for them to apply any loans or any assistance from the government.
No, can I just say something? Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. I think it's not Cendana, and it's strange that Cendana reports to MOF and not to a cultural ministry, which is very strange. I think that fundamentally we need a proper structure. Who's our godfather, godmother in the arts and culture? It shouldn't be Cendana. It shouldn't. Is it JKKN? Should JKKN be our godmother? Who do we go to? I had that same problem here in Penang when I talked to the YBs, and I said none of them are passionate about the arts, right? And it's not only in Malaysia. We can't even say Penang or Malaysia. No country out there I know has a minister that's passionate about the arts or sincere or ikhlas, except probably France. So then what do we do? At least if they get appointed to be ministers or head of this, they should learn their job and at least try to understand, or partner people who advise them.
Okay. Very interesting when you talk about the government. Yeah, about the government. Joe has mentioned a bit about the role of government too. I think you mentioned about the local authority as well. So how have the local authority created an environment that encourage culture and creative cities activities during the COVID-19? Is there any effort from the government, from the local authority?
No, I think local authorities don't take things very seriously. I think Penang is an exception, maybe because they have been out there really kind of advocating Penang as a culturally dynamic society. Apart from that, I don't think most of our local authorities or authorities of any kind care very much about creative work. But here again, when we talk about the creative industry, if you're looking at things like the managerial side, there is very little expertise on the managerial side. There is not much expertise on some of the more bureaucratic elements. There are problems of tax structuring that need to be addressed. Most art organizations, which are in reality non-profit organizations, but actually are registered as businesses, so you are on that. There seems to be no will at all to push for legislation to make these things easier. After the change of government in 2018, I was called up by the Council of Anglo Persons to talk about some aspects of the creative life, cultural life, in particular with Lusaka's work with traditional artists. There is no tax, not even exemption, kind of tax support for work of this kind, research in education, work with youth, or if there is, it's very, very difficult to negotiate. So these are aspects of the industry that I'm talking about. I also I'm very uncomfortable with this idea of monetizing the arts, because our idea of monetizing the arts is very blinkered and it's very linear. The arts can monetize the society, but not in the ways that we assume it. As in, the arts is not cash rich. That's not how it works. but the arts is the center of attraction upon which all kinds of other industries can also bloom. So this kind of approach and knowledge is also not there. Yeah, and it should be discussed not merely within the cultural sphere, it should be discussed within the social sphere, it should be discussed within the economic sphere in particular. And we don't have that kind of expertise. So for as long as our literacy level remains that low, we can only adopt this language of charity, sedekah mentality, you see, of give me this and give me that, because I'm so important to you. But I think if you go around and ask a lot of people in social life, remember that if you want to claim to be an industry, then you play by the same rules of every other industry. That is also being assaulted by this pandemic, except they have structures that they can seem to work on, and they have a vocabulary by which they can negotiate their position. We don't.
I think if I could add on that, I think that in terms of policies and governance, of course, even in terms of even if let's say a venue owner, right, they want to do things proper. It's not easy to get an entertainment license, for a gig venue to get licensed to do that. And that's a big issue as well. And with filmmakers and freelancers and things like that, there is no safety for them. You're right, exactly. How come when it comes to creative part, when a client hires you to do something, creative designing, they act as if they own your life, and payment comes in later, keep on pushing it. And this is so normal in the creative industry with freelancers and stuff like that. And that's crazy. So you've got to choose your life between working in a TV station, advertising agency, or struggle. Doing your own thing and struggle. And that's really hard, because living life as a creative freelancer, you're constantly dealing with, of course, your clients. For example, I do a job for a music video, and normally, with other industries, there's a contract before you start the work. You sign a contract first. In creative industry, none of your people that hire you want to sign any contract, so you don't have any deposits. So you start your work, you did the whole work, and then suddenly you decide halfway, oh, you know what? Actually, that's not what I thought about inside my head. Your head lah. That's not how it works. But that is how it is in Malaysia. Constantly, creative people, that's what they are facing. There's no sort of association that kind of protects all of us. And you're seeing things like MACP or things like that. People want to do live streaming shows, but they're trying to collect money from these people. And it's hard, how are we going to make money if there's so many things trying to take it back? And I understand there has to be some sort of system, but honestly, it doesn't work. Yeah, and there's no safety for creative people. This is very frustrating.
Can I respond to Ahmad? Ahmad Faris, I once spoke in Hong Kong and said, I wish I had more government money. And someone came up to me and says, wish not that, because then you have to do what they want. So I think as independent people, what works really well is do your own thing. And government nak bagi duit, bagus, syukur. Tak bagi, tak apa. And what's happening in Penang now, the government's been really good. They've had state tourism has come out with loans for artists, grants for artists. GTWHI has come out. But what is also working ground level is people are now doing collectives as a group of collectives, like an armada of ships, all sailing the same direction with the state and other agencies from the state as jigsaw pieces only. If they want to work with us, it's fine. If they don't want to work with us, it's fine. They want to give us money, it's fine. They don't want to give us money, fine. We'll make the changes. And I think what you've done, what Adin has done is great. So if all of us got together as a major jigsaw piece, and it's just a small piece. The government is also just smaller pieces. We'll find the money. We'll make it work. But I think, I'm not dissing the government. I'm all for the government. They've given a lot of money. I think how the government has spent money on institutions like Karya Nikah, Kraft Tangan, FINAS, and all that should be looked into, that have proper report cards. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, like the focus is really not about this in government or this in China or this in whatever it is. It's saying like there's something fundamentally wrong. And you're right. You're right that people do need to get together, and we can't wait. Independent itself, the idea of independent itself, how I define it is people who don't wait. They want to do something, they make it happen. And so far with Tapao TV and a lot of, we're very resilient, especially independent people, they're very resilient. But if we are talking about growing beyond that, I think there has to be some fundamental changes because we don't want to just float. We want, like, I didn't do this in order for me to just survive. Like, I want to make it. That's what I want to do. But there some assistance in that sense would help, and it would be very, very important as well. Yeah.
Can I say something? No, I think we're getting basically to the heart of what the problem is. There is no broad conversation and no sustained conversation. First of all, literacy becomes a problem. One of my great concerns, and I've observed this being actively asked for close to 30 years, is when certain agencies are given the sole right to determine, what's to be funded and not funded. One of my great fears is you create a culture of ingratiation. We have so many feudal structures already that really need to be shattered. We don't need another one here with artists needing to ingratiate themselves with particular kinds of agencies. It does create a very ugly culture. We need to instead have a far broader conversation, and we have those references. This is why I keep emphasizing the fact that tradition is very important, because in tradition, in studying tradition, you already have an existent ecosystem that merely needs to evolve. These are traditions that involve communities. They are performed by people who live within a subsistence economy, who understand how, for example, to revolve money. Also, what art delivers to a community, how central it is to the worldview and community lives of communities. But they are not our reference point. Our reference points are constantly European cities with their, Australian this and whatever not. It's really so bizarre, and our conversation is highly colonized. Still, there's nothing really that is authentically our voice. I think this needs to be addressed. And when we talk about a period of isolation and introspection, these are the things you need to develop. But it requires a lot of rigorous learning. It requires spaces in the media, for example, to talk about things like this. We have something here called corporate social responsibility. Every company is does anyone know what it is? And does anyone know where this money goes? No. So it has to be navigated, all of these things. And that is the conversation we need to have. Now, the other thing is, when we have this broader conversation, we will also look at the social outlook that has defined this country for 40 and 50 years. Okay? Policymakers don't care very much about arts and culture because we're still a country that is so devoted to heavy industry development. Right? While the rest of the world is already looking at things like sustainability, environmental concerns, ways of renewability. We only say that in a gestural way, so that we can be as trendy as everybody else. But it's so substanceless, and culture is one of those areas in which we really need that can contribute. While heavy industry or hard economy cannot be gotten rid of altogether, I mean, that's the way of the world, right? But a soft economy, a complementary soft economy, particularly for people who are creative, where creative resources are existent in places where a hard economy cannot benefit so much, places in Kelantan, Terengganu, that's where you need to fall back on culture, the arts, cuisine, the environment, the ecosystem, which can help sustainable communities and have done so for centuries.
When you mentioned about CSR, that gives me an idea. I'm involved with a lot of CSR where they do a lot of activities and they donate to NGO. So most of the NGO, like OPU, the people, cancer, and society, and society, and all that. But maybe it's also timely for the government to allow CSR, not just for NGO, but for art and culture. So that
But
it will be vibrant.
I think it already is. Yeah. Because think of funding. When we talk about funding, our public universities are underfunded. The University of Malaya is struggling for funds. Our premier university used to be one of the premier universities in Asia, is struggling for funds. So there are all these areas that need to be looked at because we have not cultivated that culture of looking at investment in society, investment in education, investment in culture. We still are clinging on to a charity mentality whereby, if you ingratiate yourself with me and come up with a sad story, I mean, through some shillings at you, that is still very much, I'm sorry to say, that's still very much the level of our conversation about cultural life.
Okay, for information, this webinar has been viewed by almost 1,206 viewers. Congratulations.
I'm sorry for saying all those things.
Okay, I think talking about investment needed for this kind of creativity. Yeah? So what kind of policies or what policies are needed to foster the investment in culture and creativity industry? What do you think about this? Anyone want to start the question? Policies. What level? Who's going to evolve and so on?
Can I just check? Whatever happened to the Pemandu workshops that happened, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? That they had 2 weeks workshop, they brought everybody there.
It's 12 years ago.
And there was supposed to be something that came out of it.
Yeah, 12 years ago.
They were supposed to be advising on policies and structure. They, like I didn't say, maybe it's just done in namesake. I don't know. I'm not. I really would like to know what outcome came out of that. So much money, so much time. Everybody contributed. They made people come down, spend days there. So and then hilang macam tu saja. Done.
I was on
when was that?
The 50 Advisory Council on Culture and the Arts, but they weren't interested in any consultation. They had us all there, and then they got some, a foreign consultancy agency to essentially tell us what we are supposed to say. Right? So this is a major, I think, a major cause of concern. Yeah. As for Chindana, I've been spoken as an advisory person for them for a very long time, sometimes going quite far. I remember going to Moderator or something to talk to their, what the effect of that is, I have yet to get a sense of.
I think that's the thing that we've got to make sure though. You see a lot of these initiatives, right? So the moment that it was launched, a lot of money is spotted, we're doing this, we're doing that. Then you're seeing a couple years later, like, oh, okay, what happened to it? Like, how do we ensure, like, this is the part that I don't know. Because I'm glad Cendana is doing what they're doing, but how do we ensure that it doesn't repeat itself? Like money going there, people doing this and that, but I hope it's not gone. Then after that, like, what's the impact of it? There has to be a system that basically, like, okay, after this many years, this should be open to public. What happened to your whole policy, this thing that you're doing? Because we don't know.
Maybe the government need to give a tax exemption to art and culture. Like currently, we don't have.
There already is. There already is, but it's very convoluted. Not easy.
Okay, go for that. What does you comment on? Parents, okay. Joe, want to talk something about policy?
I wanted to talk.
Anyone would like to pick up the policy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Policy. The policy. Policy needed to foster the investment in culture and creative cities.
You wanted to make a comment? Well, Penang again, because it's not just state government. We have other agencies like Think City and all that, working into some sort of structure to have people interested in the arts and culture in Penang. And then when you do things, then you'll find a lot of like organically new art shops open, new studios open. People come to Penang to live, to do art here. So there's no real structured policies as such, but it's grown organically without putting pen on paper. But I think like what I didn't say is, I think, and Ahmad, we all echo the same thing. I think we really need to sit down and do from ground zero paperwork. What is missing? What do we need? What sort of structure? And have a game plan. You look at Singapore, how they plan every 5 years, they build this, and then 5 years later, they're already ready with the next one. Here we are every 5 years saying, oh, we're going to do something, we're going to do something. And what is our benchmark? What's our goalpost? What have we achieved? So that's, I think, our fundamental problem. We need to have structure. We need to have a game plan, how to beat the rest of Southeast Asia. I like Ahmad saying that, like, I want to take over Asia. Ahmad, contact me.
Will do, yeah. I think that the other thing is that also probably that I hope there's a lot of like creative people who's involved in this, watching this. Yeah, part of the problem that I feel is also art people also like to play the same game. So you like to push it like, it's government doesn't do this, government doesn't do that, but we also have to like really voice out and get involved. And part of the biggest problem is actually uniting, like if let's say the government is not doing, like for example, filmmakers, right? So, if they don't do like contracts, there's no systemic like that, it doesn't happen, then, association is very important, even for independent artists, and we have to kind of work together because then they don't have to answer to anyone. Yeah, if we kind of like the art kind of community kind of gets together, and that's why I feel like community is key. Like there has to be a community, because the voice of you alone complaining, posting Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's not going to do much. But if we actually, and this is where it starts, hopefully, that you have to gather the voices, you have to unite, and get people to answer the questions. Also, you have to contribute. It's not as easy as, because I understand that, like I work a lot with independent artists as well, and you're right, people complain about forms or no support here and there, but they refuse to go down and listen. You have to somehow meet halfway, and at what point is halfway, we don't know, but that's what I think that should be said, and maybe there's ways to facilitate for these things to happen, to have a bigger target, so that, okay, this is something that we could work together on, instead of it being like, okay, you're seeing the goalpost is here, I'm seeing the goalpost is here, we're not anywhere, we're missing the goal completely.
Okay, it's very interesting. I think the viewer also want to ask something about the topics today. So we have 7 questions, yeah, from the public, from the viewer. 1, really interesting insight. Thanks for hosting this event. You keep talking about community and ecosystem. How do we build a strong community in urban and non-urban setting? I want to, yeah.
Okay. No, I think the community is already there. I think Malaysian society in general has evolved in very sophisticated ways. And a lot of this impatience and a lot of the interest actually in things like creating a reading culture, creating a culture of appreciation of the arts, comes from the fact that society is already frustrated with what exists already, right? And they're so exposed. I'm amazed, while we were supporting a great pirating DVD industry, the amount of people who got educated in world cinema, for example. Next week or 2 weeks from now, I'm giving a lecture to students at the University KL on modern Bengali cinema. because there has been so much interest cultivated all through these years of being DVD pirates and things like that. But your exposure to world culture at its highest level has been very great. So I think there is a great chasm already between the community which exists and what is actually being given to and for them. I'm always very encouraged that when Pusaka used to do its free public nights, when we would bring traditional or ritual performers from all over the country and present them for free or on a donation basis. I mean, the capacity audience was incredible. 300, 400, up to 450, 500 sometimes. I think you have been for some of them in Publica. In a venue that the capacity is 250 or 300. Yeah, so this interest is very much there. So I think the community is already there. But the channels to voice out what a community wants, what it expects, those channels don't play so important. As a journalist, I must say I'm very sad about where the media has gone, because the media used to be very, very dedicated to creating space for these kind of things.
Yeah, I don't know whether it might be a damn answer to this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Maybe if you're talking about like not just urban, you're looking at everywhere, right? What's there everywhere? Schools. Maybe you can start there. Like even to have club penghargaan seni and to make it like something of a standard in every single place. I don't know whether that could happen or not, but that's when you start to meet and build a community. And I feel like in the independent scene, anywhere around the world, the center of it all is the gig venue. That is your community center in a way. And if we kind of like make sure that every kind of like little place has a small gallery or a small gig venue, or every big city has an independent cinema that plays movies all year round, that just the whole point is to cultivate people to appreciate art, starting from school all the way to having like a common art space everywhere. That could be the start. But you have to make sure that these things are run properly, because sometimes it's not really about, I think all the time, it's not about the idea, it's more of execution. That's always been a problem. But I think if you're talking about not just cities, that's where things, start in school, like club seni should be club yang tak ada orang join and tak ada benda nak buat. You should provide materials such as, like imagine if let's say every school on a certain particular day has a Yasmin Ahmad week or P. Ramlee week, or there's a Sudirman competition that happens all over. Then we're going to start to see that there is some sort of a center to that. I don't know whether that's right or not, but I think if let's say you want to start from there.
Yes.
Okay, just 1 second. Well, what we need actually a culture awareness, creativity awareness, which we need to build from the start. Yeah, probably for the education. In Indonesia, they have a subject in the primary school on solely on culture and creativity, but we don't have it here in Malaysia. So probably we need to have a paradigm shift in order to achieve that, and we need to build up our identity. The reason why Penang is so successful in art and creativity is because they have an identity. It's a place for food festival, it's a place for heritage, right? So people go there, and when you are there, you're happy. I go to Penang every year for a living. I don't know why, but I always get a hotel, I go to same places, but it didn't bore me at all. So in KL, we are very rich in multicultural race here. So we need to highlight that, because that would be our strong identity. I don't know how, but like to bring it awareness.
Okay. Sorry, I can hear. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
One question from the public. Someone with a question about how much does art and culture add value to our economic system? Asking by Sakura Jamaluddin from IRDA, from Iskandar Malaysia. You want to pick up the question?
Yeah, the question is very interesting because what economic value? Yeah. What is the definition of economic value? We don't know that yet. Economics also operates in an ecosystem. Yeah, not everything is cash rich in an ecosystem, but the richness is distributed. That's our inability to understand the place of culture within the economic life and economic ecosystem. We tend to want to monetize culture, as in it has to be cash rich. That's never going to happen. What it does, it stimulates things around the economy. You see, and as long as we don't have that conversation and we don't have that understanding, then we cannot actually understand what the economic worth of culture is. But to be able to have that conversation, you must be literate. People are not steeped in the language, vocabulary, and study of the economic value of culture. So we speak in a very stunted way, and our perspectives are sometimes all over the place. Yeah. Another thing, if I might say, is a lot of our conversation today is not a new one. It has been going on for 60 years and 70 years about looking at the structures and so on. I'm very fortunate that I represent a generation. I was born in '69, and we are very much a watershed generation. So I've been very privileged to have been able to work very closely with people like Ibrahim Hussein, the painter. I worked with him very closely on his book. I worked with Latif Muhyiddin. I've known and worked with people like Reza Piadaza. Many people of whose writings and whose conversation on the arts are so sophisticated. And believe me, the conversation we are having today, compared to the conversation we were having in the 70s, is really at a very low level. Because there is you don't come from a sustained conversation. You're constantly reiterating the same things all over again because you have no sense of the past. Right? I think this is very debilitating for us. And really, to be honest, I have not seen any properly constructed argument of the creative industries to the large public. I've just not heard it at all. It's a lot of pity talk. It is a lot of seeking sympathy within a social setting that is growing increasingly impatient with the demands of the artists. Yeah? Increasingly impatient. So we need to rethink all these things. And if we are talking about COVID as the great leveler, ground zero, well, where better place to begin that conversation than here?
Good.
I kind of like that point as well. You know, like how art is always, when people want to help art, it's more of sympathy. And I feel like it's the way that we have to approach it as well. Like, you know, the way that I approach, the way that we do Tapao, like, it's not really about sympathy, it's about opportunity. If we can somehow come up with what is the opportunity that we have here, we put a value to it, then we've got something. But if it's all about like, oh, kesian artist or whatever, then it's not going to go anywhere. It's got to be an opportunity, and there's definitely an opportunity out there. That's why I see, like, you know, before we talk about economics value, what is the general, why is art important, you know? You buy makan tiap hari, you kenyang, so that's why there's value to put a certain price to it. But how does art, you know, affect your life? People are not really aware of, it's there, it's everywhere, but how does it really affect your life? Once you manage to think about that, then you can slowly put a value into it, and that's where we can come up with that numbers.
Okay, thank you. I think it's almost there. Before we can actually go further to sit down and analyze that, there's one question. It's very, I think the rest touching on policies, on educations, what else? The initiative and so on. But it's a bit different here. How do we shape the future in the new era while firefighting the resistance to change the like-minded culture towards creative and culture industries? Baliana Jasmine. How do we shape the future in this new era while firefighting the resistance to change the archaic-minded culture? Archaic-minded culture. ARCHAIC. Minded culture. Yeah. Towards creative and culture industry. I mean, so it's usually interesting question.
Yeah. First of all, a lot of our creative life is being dictated to by bureaucracies. So the one thing that bureaucracies don't appreciate is creativity. Yeah. So we really need some kind of engagement in which creative people and the life of the imagination is not always prey to bureaucratic systems. Yeah, and the bureaucratic minded. We require engagement. I think, but as I said, the arts community, and there isn't an arts community, if you ask me, in this country, we haven't evolved as an arts community yet. We need to do things like serious lobbying. Do you ever hear a culture or arts question regularly raised in our parliamentary sessions? Absolutely not, never. Do you ever hear the Ministry of Education talk about culture and creativity? Yes, but only in a kind of new age sense. It is not deeply interrogated. And I must say, one of the problems with the artistic community and creative community, who may be the ones responsible for shaping this kind of dialogue, we ourselves are not having that dialogue because we are talking about things like this, policy, firefighting the archaic bureaucratic mind, and we are not developing enough. We are not innovative enough. We're not imaginative enough. We're not aesthetic enough. So we are not creating a language about creative life while always having to just address this question of structures, ecosystems, and essentially bureaucratic systems. So I think we as a force need to be more empathetic of each other. And we need to know how to basically do a lot of lobbying, and a lot of people in the urban town planning and so on, for example. They're very astute and very good at this kind of thing, of being able to engage ministries and local councils, local governments. We don't know those skills at all.
Yeah, I think I covered almost everything. Now we back to Lisa. Probably we want to say something as a discussion.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dato. Thank you to all the panelists. I think when we first started to have this topic as part of our Malaysia Urban Forum 2019, we had a lot of interest on the subject. So, but what I just realized is that, here we are just a small number of what we are representing out there. There's so many other people that actually is involved in this whole industry. I think I've learned a lot actually with listening to just all of you. Not only learn a lot, probably open up different perspectives, but I suddenly am a little bit worried also actually. Worried because we call ourselves developed, and we've actually progressed so much, and yet we are losing a lot as well, So actually, it's actually quite scary to think about if we're not doing something that's not fast enough, we are actually losing something very, very precious to us. We talk about sustainability for a very long time, but I think culture should be that fourth pillar of sustainability. It sort of brings everything together. Like we talk about appreciation. It not only appreciates about our life, it appreciates about our people, and appreciates about our culture. I think if only we can appreciate all that, then only we could talk about how we make a difference to society. So we've been talking about sustainability of people, but we've never brought the equation of culture into that. So, and the same with economics, we've been talking about the sustainability of economy, but what keeps on, how do we sustain the economy is actually using our culture to create that innovation, and that will actually improve our productivity. And like Edin said, it's not monetizing it, it's not like commercializing it, but it's actually the means of making it work, stitching it, sparking it, creating that level of better economy in that sense. Because well happy, they are well cared for, they understand that culture makes them happy, they are more productive and it goes back to the economy. So on one hand, we are thinking of arts from the angle of the product, which is why we sort of monetize it from tourism angle. But I think, I agree with a lot of the discussions that we've had here. The support system needs to be there. The ecosystem needs to be, it's probably there. I don't think we really need to create it. I think it's there, as Edwin and a lot of panelists have said. Yeah, but probably revisit or bring them all together and have that broad discussion, as you call it, And maybe we could really try to understand, how to create the fundamental needs to support it properly. For example, from the institutional side, the governance side, the infrastructure side, creating a space for every city, like you said, So how the local government understand it. To be fair, there's a lot of things that our government are thinking of. And I think probably we've always take culture for granted because we feel that we are so multiracial, so that we are already culturally, it's not automatically, we've already taken care of that, in all our equitable policies. I think we sort of think that it's done with. But I think we are not, even though you don't like the word monetize, but we are not using it in terms of sparking our growth. And I think this is where they are using and that's many countries are starting to realize that. And it's weird because these countries, some of them who are doing it, they're not even multicultural. Some of them are cultural in that sense, but they believe in cultural capital as a very big impetus to spur their other economies. So I think this is where what we've taken for granted for generations and years, I think it's time to actually revisit it. Probably the COVID is a good time. It's a blessing because we have people who have suffered, and people who are, whose life depends on culture and arts, and they are badly affected. And probably this is the best time to make use of the conversation. Putting culture under one ministry totally, I'm not sure whether it's a good idea, but also not the best idea also, because I think the way culture is, it should be represented in almost every, in education, even in our KPKT, because we cover all the cities, and if that aspect is important to cities, that conversation must happen in our ministry as well. So I think that's why I think Cendana, we just cannot decide where it should be, so it's under MUF. So I think this is where if we understand the importance of culture as a very strong fundamental asset to our nation, probably that's where it needs to be in actually more than just one ministry. But definitely having this collective effort is important because I think arts, culture is such a big group of people involved, and I think from very beginning, just now reminded us that it's not just about the urban people, it's also about the rural. And there are many of you, Faris, who is doing the independent artists or the independent startups. So it's for me, it's a big future, very big future that we are looking at. And that's why I think this conversation is actually very, very important. I think I agree that we should stop all these pity talks and thinking of it as a handout kind of a society or community. I think they just wants to be recognized, and there's not much discussion about it. There's not much review about it. There's not much literature on it, And yeah, I think I just realized that there's a lot of work to be done in this area, because Urbanice, we are a center of excellence for under KPKT. We look at how to build better cities, sustainable cities, as well as look into the well-being of communities. So, and in these aspects, there's this big community which are very involved in culture and arts, and they actually are very important. So whether it is a 12 major plan or a 2040 plan, I think it needs to be inbuilt in almost all plans that we're looking at. And this is where, gathering the right people to listen to us, I think, is also very important. Maybe we could bring the whole Penang, the whole Penang to the whole country, what they're doing. Because they've got a supportive government, supportive local government, We've got a very vibrant society as well, which is quite rooted in terms of how it's part of their life and economy. So probably it's a good model to share with everyone. I don't think it's a perfect model either, because we also have places like Kelantan, Terengganu, which no one speaks for them. But just as vibrant, I grew up as an anak polis who lived so many. So when you travel and live in so many cities, I always when people ask me, "You orang mana?" I always answer orang Malaysia. I've been saying that because I grew up in Sabah, all over the place, and I think it's important because understanding other people's culture make you more tolerant, make you more sympathetic, make you more and this is why it's so important. And compared to us not understanding what our roots are, and and the worst is when some of you were talking about mimicking, right? That is actually quite scary, on what really will be our identity, especially for our future generations. What will it be, and we are already changing our urban scape so much so it's really losing its identity on its own. So if we don't put soul back to the cities, to our place of life, I think we will slowly lose it out. And this is one area where culture can really make a difference, I think, to society, to our economy, as well as in terms of our everyday lives. So I think that from my side, I think that the discussion we've had today is something that we want to carry on. And if possible, we want to bring more people to the table for the discussion. So in MUF2020, which is the actual event on the 28th to 30th of September, we really want to have a proper special session, and that's where we hope more people. We can't have more people in one room because of the SOP, but we will have better infrastructure to have better outreach to more people, and so we are hoping to get at least more broader base of discussion. That means more people on the table, and most important, how do we say what we need to say and present it to the decision makers. And I think that is the objective of the one of the objectives of the Malaysian Open Forum, is to provide a platform for us to make sure these gaps are being addressed. So maybe next year and years to come, we are seeing that this discussion, instead of all problems, but we'll be celebrating. that's actually the wish. We'll be celebrating that we are successful in actually addressing this issue that we have today. So on behalf of Urbanice, I'd like to really thank all the panelists, including Joe. Sorry, Joe, you're not here with us, but we hope to continue the conversation again. And thank you very much from Urbanice.
Yeah, it's a very good summary from Tuan Liza. I think we're talking about so much about the culture. Without culture, I think you are is halfly civilized, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, it's very important. So thank you all the panelists. I think I just wanted your 18 minutes is very unique for me. Yeah, edit, yeah, edit. It's Adi. Okay. Mr. Joe, Mr. Ahmad Faris, and also Architect Mahasima, thank you so much for your involvement and participation in this one. And also the artist here, Jamila, thank you so much for your very big kind of contribution here as well. And with that, I thanks everything. I thanks the panelists. I thanks the viewers. And see you again at Malaysia Urban Forum 2020, 28th to 30th September this year. Yeah. With that, thank you so much.